Hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming today to the Center for Arts and Humanities Urgency of Now series. I'm Amy Randall, and I'm the Associate Director for the Center for Arts and Humanities, as well as Professor of History and Chair of the History Department. Michelle Burnham, the Director for the CH and Professor of English, Britt Kane, the Center Manager, and I want to thank you for joining us today. Before we begin our discussion today, I want to acknowledge that Santa Clara University occupies the unceded ancestral lands of the Ohlone and Muwekma Ohlone peoples. To recognize this truth is an expression of gratitude and appreciation to those whose territory we reside on, and a way of honoring the indigenous people who have been living and working on this land from time immemorial. I'd like us to take a moment of silence to register this land acknowledgement, pay respect to the Ohlone and Muwekma Ohlone peoples and elders, past and present, and as we do so, also recognize that land acknowledgements do not exist in a past tense, as colonialism is a current and ongoing process. Thank you. Okay, I want to thank Professor Allia Griffin for coordinating the Urgency of Now series events this year. She's already organized 2 terrific events, and today's event is the third and final event in our series. Professor Griffin will be introducing our panelists today, but before she does this, I'm going to introduce her. So Professor Allia Griffin has been teaching at Santa Clara University since 2014. She earned her PhD from literature from UCSD and is an interdisciplinary teacher-scholar specializing in literature, performance, and cultural studies. Her areas of teaching include race and ethnicity, African American studies, and Mina Swana diaspora studies. Her research examines how writers and artists resist state-sanctioned violence and erasure by working to document their own histories. Her writing has appeared in many different publications, including Lateral, Cultural Studies Association Journal, and Contemporary. Dr. Griffin is the recipient of the Brutocayo Family Foundation Award for Curriculum Innovation, one of the highest teaching honors awarded for her expertise in curriculum development and student engagement. Beyond her work on campus, Professor Griffin volunteers as an art teacher in a community-based art program for children, and she also apparently serves as a youth soccer coach, which I was excited to learn about. So thanks again, a huge thanks to Professor Allia Griffin for all of her work in organizing this series, and I will hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Amy. Thank you so much to the Center for Arts and Humanities, Amy, Michelle, and Britt, for your support this year. It's been such a joy to work on this series with you. I am so thrilled to introduce Professor Aldo Billingslea. As some of my students already know, Aldo was my teacher when I was here. He was my favorite professor that I had at Santa Clara, so I recommend taking a class with him if you haven't already. He joined the theater department faculty in 1996. He earned his BA in English and Communication Arts at Austin College, his MA in Secondary Education with a theater and English emphasis at Austin College, and his MFA in Acting at Southern Methodist University. He has appeared in an enormous amount of productions, so many. I wanted to highlight the Wilson productions. Can I speak to those? So August Wilson, there was one of the classes I took with Aldo while I was a student here, was the August Wilson seminar, and it was a class that totally changed the trajectory of my career. I went on to do a master's, and I focused on August Wilson because I was so inspired by this class. So Wilson wrote 10 plays, one play for every decade of the 20th century, and Aldo has appeared in 8 out of 10 of those plays, which is a huge, huge honor. I also wanted to share that Aldo Billingslea worked in the San Francisco Bay Area at the American Conservatory Theater, Aurora Theater, California Shakespeare Theater, Cutting Theater, Lorraine Hansberry Theater, to name several others as well. And he teaches American Theater from the Black Perspective, a seminar on August Wilson, Acting for Non-Majors, acting styles, Shakespeare, and acting for the camera. Please join me in welcoming Professor Aldo Billingslea.
So my microphone is working really well, and so we're all good. I do want to say that at the risk of a mass exodus, that right now, oh yeah, we're gone. Right now, we don't have Professor Karina Gutiérrez here. Prof is not here right now, and we are grateful to her because, quite honestly, that's why a lot of you are here. A lot of you are her students, and you know how much we love her. So put that out there. The other thing to say is to give props where props are due. The Brudico Teaching Award is about innovation and excellence in teaching in the classroom. Allia was the best student I ever had. When I was teaching the class, American Theater from the Black Perspective, she took the class. I was convinced she was going to get her PhD. She was going to go to some really, really amazing institution, and then she didn't apply. And then deadlines went by, and then she came in and goes, I want to apply, but the curtain's closed. And she did her master's at Chico State. And that was exactly where she was supposed to be. Because there they had a huge number of students who didn't feel they belonged. And she was teaching them. And as a graduate student, won the teaching award there. As a graduate student. And then went on to UC San Diego, where she got her PhD and did some amazing stuff there and was active in some of the campus protests that were happening there that were really important in helping change what was going on with some UCs, and that's really important too. And she came back here and she took the class that I was teaching and she made it better, much better. I sat in and was like, oh, I left a bunch of stuff on the table. I did not prepare the same meal that she prepared. She put it out right. So if you have an opportunity to take a class, and some of you, I believe, may be her students, if you have an opportunity to take a class with her, you know what I'm talking about. She's an asset. She makes Santa Clara much, much better. Put your hands together for Allia, if you would, please.
Thank
you.
Let's go. Okay. Thank you so much. I wanted to put this conversation in context a little bit. So the students in class today, so if you're in class, this is our class session today. Can you raise your hand for in class today? Okay. So we are reading Gloria Anzaldúa this week, and Anzaldúa ends her book by talking about the life cycle. She talks about life, death, decay, and rebirth, and asks us to think about like where we are. So I often, in the 10 years that I've been teaching this particular class, Intro to Race and Ethnicity, ask my students, where do you feel like we are in the life cycle right now? And there's always a different answer every time I ask my students. They can rationalize why we are in decay, for example, or why they see this as a moment of rebirth. When we think about the Center for Arts and Humanities conversations this year, the first one really took off from the summer, which was the Supreme Court decision that ended race-conscious admissions. That's where we started in the fall. I thought of it as a moment of death, right? The end of something really critical that was going on. In winter, we talked about mass incarceration, thinking about decay, what the carceral state does to us. When we think about spring, I wanted us to think about rebirth. I wanted us to think about joy in some capacity and thinking about theater as a space of caretaking, and to really wonder at the work that theater does. So I hope that helps put us into context when we think about rebirth and joy, that it is connected to that death and decay, that it's connected to sorrow. I'm sitting with Ross Gay's Inciting Joy, so I'm going to quote from that today. But that's really where I wanted to situate our conversation, to think about that. So the first question I have for Aldo relates to how you came to this stage. And when did you know that you wanted to work in theater? One of the things that I was really grateful for as your student was that you spoke to us about finding our calling. And what it meant for us. And I know I have some students here that are graduating in a few weeks and are thinking about, the stress of this anticipated future and the pull out of the present moment. And so when you're thinking about your calling, how did you know that this was your calling? Can you tell us a little bit about this moment for you, or this series of moments?
I came to the stage because I wanted to get kissed. I was in 7th grade. There had not been a lot of that, and I thought that would be good. I was in Texas, and the middle school that I went to would always go over to the high school to watch the High School Musical. And so we go to the high school. The high schoolers are ginormous, scary people. And so you're intimidated sitting there, and you're surrounded by them. They're in the balcony, so it feels like they're even bigger. And when they react to something that's on stage, that reaction charges you but scares you. And one of the big reactions happened because people on stage were kissing. One person's lips would touch another person's lips in front of us all, and that was thrilling. But then that reaction that was happening all around us was thrilling. There was that. And then there was this woman up there who was just gorgeous, and she was singing a song called I'm Just a Girl Who Can't Say No. And I thought, that's the girl for me. And then I'm looking at the guy she's kissing, and I was like, why is she kissing that guy? And I'm like, oh, yeah, it's a play. Director said, you have to kiss that guy. And she had to do it. And I was like, oh, I'm going to audition for a play. And so I did. And I will say that it took 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, first year in college, my sophomore year in college, before I got a stage kiss. And it was on the cheek. That's a big letdown. I mean, when that's your first goal. But by that time, I was hooked. It's the thing that brought me the most joy. It's the thing that made me feel the most alive. I love playing football. Initially, I wasn't very good at it, but I loved playing it. And I loved doing these plays. And when I was in high school, I could do both. And when I got to college, after my first year of playing football, I wasn't really happy. And I was on defense. I wanted to be on offense. And things weren't going as smoothly as I wanted them to. So I tried to get into a play, and I couldn't do it because there wasn't anything right for me. The last play was all women and one male voice. And I was like, I asked the director, can I play that male voice? And she said, no, it's already cast. And I was depressed. And I was like, can I audition as a woman? And she was like, no. This 6'4" woman on stage, she didn't want it. I realized how much I missed it, how important it was to me. And I told my coach that I needed to audition for the next play. And he was new, and he was like, oh, yeah, sure, whatever. You'll have to do both. I was like, I'll do both. And it made for some really long days. But I was really happy, much happier. So I think the joy was a big part of it. When I got out of grad school, I was working in San Diego at the Old Globe Theater, and I was going up on my days off, or my Mondays, to audition in LA for camera stuff. And I got a call back on the day that we had a play in San Diego. And the callback was at 10 a.m. in the morning. San Diego's not that far from LA, but LA traffic is its own beast of a thing. And so I head up for my audition at 7 in the morning to make my 10 o'clock audition. And my buddy was like, hey, I want to go. And I'm like, you know what, sure. And he's like, I just want to see how this works and blah, blah, blah. And so I do well. And they're like, okay, we want you to meet producers. And I was like, great. And they said, today at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. Well, LA rush hour is going to be start at like 3 o'clock. And I've got a show that night at 8 o'clock. Is that enough time? That's how bad the traffic is. I'm like, ugh, I think I better. He said, no. I'm the casting director for the theater you're working at. I know. I'll get you in early and I'll get you out. And I was like, okay. I auditioned. It was a show that had James Earl Jones in it. It was this thing that was really, really on for a short time called Gabriel's Fire. And I'm like, this scene, I could be in this. James Earl Jones. So I auditioned, jump on the road, me and my buddy, and the stage manager's not happy that I'm gone because I've taken my understudy. The person who's to replace me is my buddy, and he's in the car. There are stage managers in the room right now going, I know it. Lucia, I did that. It was a terrible thing. And my car, the pistons go up and down, the rods push the pistons up and down. Rod dislodges from the piston and goes through the engine. It's called throwing a rod. The engine is dead. The car is dead. And I feel like I'm dead. It's not 4 o'clock. And I'm trying to, I'm calling my dad back in Texas on a payphone. It's like a phone, except there's no games, then you have to pay, you put quarters in. Anyway, I'll explain it to you later. But I can't. And I feel like, and at that point I realize I don't care about the movie thing. I just want to be back there. I need to be on stage. I need to be with this community that we have that's created this peace. And I can say my lines, and I go to a payphone and I call my stage manager and I say, my friend helped run the lines and he doesn't have any lines in that thing. He knows the lines and he knows how to blow the sailor's whistle and how to make with the sailor's whistle that only blows one note until you shift the way the sound comes out. All this stuff. I'm trying to take her through everything and apologize and watch the clock tick and realize with every tick how much theater means to me and how much this thing hurts. I'd never heard about calling until I got here, and I had a dinner with one of the Jesuits, and they started talking about and saying that everybody has a calling. So I'm a Baptist from Texas, and preachers have callings, but everybody has a calling. They said everyone is here for a reason, and that they define that calling as when your greatest gifts, the things that you do best, the things that bring you the most joy, intersect with the things that the world need. There are things that make the world better, that bring us together, that empower other people, that lift up others. That point of intersection, that's why you're here. And I think back on that, I was like, I didn't know it then, but I was thinking about my calling. And realizing, that for me, that's the stage. I've done a couple of things on camera, and that's fun, and it pays exorbitantly much, much, much more than it pays to do live theater. But that's what brings me joy, and that and teaching. I thought about that when I was doing Joe Turner. Because in Joe Turner, as we were teaching, that's where I was able to bring up the calling and that Jesuit definition of calling, because August Wilson says in that play, everybody's got a song. You just got to find out what your song is. And your song is there, it's in your heart, it's kicking in your heart. And you just need to let it out. And you will know you found your song when it helps somebody else, when it reaches some other person and it lifts them up. And when you see that person is shining, when you see them really illuminated in the world, then you know that your song has found its place and you can die a happy person. So after Allia did her presentation, I sent her a note that says, I see you shining. And that's that gift that can give that way. So if you're thinking about teaching, think a lot, think hard on it. And if you're not thinking about teaching, make sure you pay your teachers, your public school teachers. This is a product of public school education. And if you want a great society, you need to do that.
I'm so glad you touched on Joe Turner's, because that's where I was headed next. Actually, I was thinking about theater as this practice of caretaking. And the moment in Joe Turner's when Loomis slashes his chest, right? And seeing that live is very heavy. The audience, so I saw it when I was a grad student in San Diego, and the audience was sort of breathless. Like no air, you know? And so I'm thinking a lot about this practice of caretaking and joy and time, right? So like all of these things coming together. When we go to live theater, we suspend time as an audience member. We are engaging with you performing something that has already occurred in the past. You're retelling it, you're re-performing it. So there's like different layers of time happening. I'm thinking about this question about navigating retelling stories that act as a witness of trauma. How have you really experienced healing through a performance, individually or communally? And also, how do you approach retellings of trauma? So I know recently you worked on The Mountaintop. So The Mountaintop is a phenomenal play by Katori Hall, and it takes place on April 3rd. So it takes place April 3rd, 1968, the evening before Martin Luther King Jr. is assassinated. And it takes us into the Lorraine Motel for that evening. And it's a really, really phenomenal play. And there's so much there in terms of just devastation. Like, it's a heartbreaking play in so many ways, right? How have you navigated trauma on stage and the potential of healing, acting as a caretaker in some capacity?
One of the things that I believe makes acting a noble profession and an art form is the fact that we as actors become a vessel to channel the words of the playwright to the audience that needs to hear it. And there's a director in San Francisco at SF Playhouse who says that theater is the empathy gym, and that there are those who are terrific empaths in history, Martin Luther King and Gandhi, Mother Teresa. These are empathy Olympians. But the rest of us, we need to go to the gym. And this is our gym where we learn to feel for others and experience that sympathetic response on behalf of someone else. In order for that to happen, the actor has to put himself into positions where they have to go through some stuff, where they have to go through some real tough-ish and come out whole, finding ways to make it sustainable so that they can do this. You know, I'm doing a play at American Conservatory Theater. You do it 8 shows a week. 8 times a week. If I'm doing Othello, I have to kill that woman and that I loved dearly, and then realize I've been tricked and that she was innocent and that I should have never killed her, and then kill myself. 8 shows a week. It can take a toll if it's not done well, if it's not done right. And one of the things that playwrights do, I think sometimes it's instinctive, I think sometimes they're conscious of it, is they give the actor a release, a point where they can let everything that they're going through out on stage and let that go. And I will tell you, my wife is very grateful when I can find that release, and I don't bring that stuff home, all right? So that I remember that's my wife. That's not Desdemona, and I just can leave her alone. Finding what that release is really important. And so it's allowed me to say, let me see the script and find out it's a great script and it's a story worth telling, even if it means me telling my trauma, my people's trauma, then I can go through that. I know actors who, after George Floyd was murdered, said, that's it, I'm not performing trauma on stage anymore. And I respect that. for some people, if you can't do that and you can't leave it, then don't do that. Because theater is hard enough. There are enough cost to it. It will cost you sometimes relationships, and financially it'll cost you, and psychologically it can cost you. It's hard. It's hard. Someone said, what advice would you have for somebody who wants to be an actor? And I was like, if there's anything else that gives you equal joy, do that instead. But if that's the thing that gives you the most joy, that may be why God put you on the planet. Then that may be the thing you need to do. And for me, not only does it give me joy, I've found a technique to work through those moments where Marcus Gardley is a fabulous playwright, and we're both fans, and Allia's brought him to Santa Clara before. He is the screenwriter for Color Purple that just won all those awards. And if you see The Shy, he wrote, almost single-handedly wrote the first season. He said they had written 1 or 2 episodes, and he came back to the writer's room, and every other writer, every single person, every other writer's assistants had all been fired except him. I said, brother, I hope you realize that's a good time to renegotiate. Always negotiate when your value is at its highest. Always negotiate when your value is at its highest. So, and Marcus wrote this play called Jesus Moonwalks the Mississippi. And the world premiere was happening at Cutting Ball. And they lost an actor and said, can you come in and do this in a week and a half or 2 weeks, I think it was. And the play starts with me in a noose. And I'm like, okay, this is what's needed to tell the story. And I was good, but putting that noose around my neck, there were several actors who would just, and they would have to leave the space to see that. It hurts people. Some of those images mean something to different people, and so for some of them, they couldn't be on stage in that moment. We're going to reblock this and make sure that this actor and this actor, they don't have to be there. And actually that hits me more than me putting the noose around my neck, just realizing that image for those people. Performing trauma is something not to be taken lightly, but I think it's a necessary part of the work if the work is going to affect us in a way that makes us think, and we think in a way that makes us change our behavior.
Can you tell us a little bit more about these moments of transformative healing that you've experienced, either individually as an audience member watching a play or communally on stage, experiences where you felt like something shifted in the room?
When we did Joe Turner's Come and Gone at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, there's a man who's really troubled, and he's looking for his wife. He's taking his daughter all over these different places to try to find his wife. He was taken illegally, and he was made a peon, and the system of peonage is like another system of slavery. He is not allowed to leave this work under threat of death. And this guy keeps people for 7 years, and then he lets them go. And then grabs more people. There's another black guy, I'll take him and I will imprison him. So this man, Harold Loomis, while he's being held captive in those 7 years, his wife moves on. And when she moves on, she leaves the daughter with her mother. So he gets out, he gets the daughter, and he's looking for this He's looking for this wife that's left him. August is trying to write about the disbursement, the history of disbursement that black people have of this is my wife and we're both slaves, and so she can be sold somewhere at someone else's whim so that they can have money. The people who own us might take out insurance policies, still an issue today. People who benefited from the insurance policies on the slaves that they owned, not the people who actually were the family of those people. All of that, those are still issues we're dealing with today. And because of the trauma that this man has gone through and the vision that he's had, he's very, very troubled. So in the end of the first act, he goes and he sees this vision. He tells people about the vision that he's seen, which is huge, huge, this huge moment. And this one man, this older man, is trying to talk him through this. And the man who's troubled, Harold Loomis, says he stands on the table and says, why does God have to be so big? How much big is there? How much big you want? And he starts to open his pants and says, how much big you want? And then people are like, whoa, 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 whoa. And there's this, is he about to drop trowel? What's going on? And there's that moment. And he says, someone says, you've got to let, you got to lean on Jesus. You got to lean on the blood of the Lamb. Jesus died for you. He bled for you. And he says, I don't need anybody to bleed for me. I can bleed for myself. And he pulls out a knife. So he takes a big knife and he pulls it out and he's going to drag it across his chest and bleed. Great artist in the theater, props artist in the theater. They took a big knife. Along the edge of the knife, they laid a tube in and then brought two pieces of metal together. And then as they brought the two pieces of metal together, they left a little tiny hole. And in the handle of the knife, they had a little lever sticking up here that you couldn't see. And as he held the knife, he would bring the handle down, which was actually in the handle a syringe of blood. And so he drew a line of blood across his chest. But I'm telling you, when he brought out that big old Bowie knife and put it to his chest, and he drags it across his chest, and you see red, there were people in that audience calling Jesus. Those noises, is happening. All that's happening. And that moment gets even bigger with some more things. And we would nail it so well that the moment is over, the scene is over, the lights come down. We walk off stage. I go downstairs. My dressing room's downstairs. We get downstairs, and then the audience starts to clap. They are silent. There's not a word. They're just, House lights come up to let people go to the restroom. Nobody moves. They're all just, we did 74 some odd performances of that show, and that happened almost every time. They just sit. And then you hear this, and then they go, reacting to each other. It's a powerful, powerful thing that brought me great joy. And there was a question you had about that, about joy. What?
I don't know what it was. I'll tell you, I was listening. I was really captivated because I remember having seen Joe Turner's, right? It does kind of connect to this larger question of a commitment to social justice and thinking about the work that Wilson does. I'm really afraid to be wrong about the date here, but I want to say that Joe Turner's Come and Gone is set in 1911.
That's right.
Okay.
I think that's right.
So it's set in 1911, and for students who are in intro right now, we learned about the chain gang. We learned about what happened after the emancipation of slavery. So we learned about the refabrication of this new type of slavery that occurred. And so I took all the classes in high school it wasn't until I read August Wilson's play, Joe Turner's Come and Gone, that I learned about the chain gang. So there was this way in his plays where he brought in, like Toni Morrison does so much, like brought in this history that has otherwise been pushed to the margin, has otherwise been erased. History that's so critical to our present moment, but history that most Americans don't know or don't have access to. And so it was through reading Wilson's plays, where he focuses on a different decade of the 20th century, that I was able to engage with history so much more, I think, truthfully. Thinking about, there were a couple places where I was interested in going, but thinking about that commitment to social justice in terms of the artists that you really are captivated by. I know you mentioned Marcus Gardley, obviously August Wilson. Are there others that you would like us to be thinking of? Or when you think about those two in particular, how do you see the commitment to social justice come through in their work?
I love people who say there's something we need to do. We can use theater to do it. So for me, Luis Valdez is huge. And looking at the Delano grape strike and saying, we can do this, we can energize people. Luis goes to Cesar Chavez and says, I have this idea. I think this will help people stay active on the protest line, to continue the boycott, and will help us make our point. And so using flatbed trucks for the stage and creating theater there. And El Teatro Campesino in San Juan Bautista is one of the monuments to that is still there, that he's still doing this thing. This math major from San Jose State who started doing theater. I think first he started doing puppets and then started doing theater and realizing this could be something that could work. So he and his sons are great directors and great actors as well. So that's an inspiration. There's a cat named Michael Gene Sullivan, who is a proud communist and one of the core members of the San Francisco Mime Troupe. He is he's an incomparable artist. He's an actor. He's a singer. He's a dancer. He's a librettist. He writes the book for musicals, but he also can write the music for musicals. He's a composer, and he is constantly trying to say there are other options to. We can have a democracy, but without the capitalism that leaves so many people behind, there's other ways to go about addressing these other needs that are there. He's a big inspiration. Viola Davis, who I first saw in San Francisco in a play in 1994. She walked out on stage and you were like, oh my, there's a goddess up there. She's amazing. And so when she got her break to go to Hollywood and do her thing, and then she starts really blowing up, and they came at her with, what is the Perfect Murder, How to Get Away with Murder? Yeah. Check out that first episode of How to Get Away with Murder and realize that was all her. She scripted that scene before she took the job. She said, all right, if we do this, this is what we need to see. We need to see this black woman who's she's a powerful woman, who's a successful woman, go home and take off her wig, take off her false eyelashes, wipe her face of makeup. We need to see that. It is such a huge. I grew up thinking that women's hair was just naturally curly or wavy or and then like, wait a minute. That smell on Saturday morning of a hot comb going through my sister's hair. Wait a minute, that's not. Oh, wait, there's this process that women are going through to do some of this stuff. And she was like, let's put it on the table. And I will be egoless enough to be the one to do that. This woman who grew up having to fight rats for her food in her home because she was so dead poor is now in a position to make those things happen. Yeah, so I clock her.
Yeah, she's amazing. I saw her as Rose.
Oh, that's right. When you went to see Fences.
I saw Fences. And I want to tell you something. Who's read Fences? You folks? Okay, I would love to see more hands up, but we'll get there. So Fences is set in the 1950s, and right before intermission, we learned that Troy has had an affair. And when I went to go see the play, and Viola Davis is playing Rose, his wife, and Denzel Washington is playing Troy. Okay, originally Troy was James Earl Jones, so it's like different. You see different, right? And we get up for intermission, and I know what happens in this play, so I know what's going to happen in the second act. I think at that point, we know he has had an affair? We know in the beginning of the second act, after intermission, he comes with the baby, right? Okay, so another woman's baby he brings home to Rose. Everybody in line for the bathroom is like, I don't know why Rose is so mad at Troy all the time. Why is she so hard on him? Why is she so upset? Because they see Denzel Washington and they can't see Troy. So they're totally captivated by like what they know is Denzel Washington. And they're just like, she just seems really harsh on him. And then you know what's going to happen after intermission. I feel like
Just real quick to know that Denzel is another, because Denzel was with the Negro Ensemble Company when they did Soldier's Play, which then became the film Soldier Story. And when in that play, Cuba Gooding Jr., Samuel L. Jackson, Denzel, just amazing cast of actors. But when they make the movie, only Denzel and Adolph Caesar are the ones that move from the play to Hollywood to do the flick. So when August Wilson's widow, Constanza, says, we want to make films of all 10 of the movies, of all 10 of the plays. We want to make movies doing this chronicle of this. Denzel says, okay, let's start with Fences, but I want to do it on stage first, and then we'll make the movie. And he said that one of the greatest achievements of his life is going to be his working to complete this entire cycle of 10 plays, and so far there's only one, but where Viola plays his wife. And his next door neighbor is played by a guy, terrific actor, good man I know, named Stephen McKinley Henderson, who right after the play had to get hip surgery. And he was like, sad because he wasn't going to then be able to be in the movie. And Denzel said, we'll wait for you. And so that he could bring him along as well, and he could be in it too. So he kept everybody except the kids, because the kids got too old. So.
I have a lot more questions, but I want to open this up to the audience to see if anybody else has a question to ask Professor Billingslea. So I'll give you a few moments to think. Britt, I can give you, or I can walk around. Any questions?
Good, then I've got questions for you. Yes, here's one.
So I was wondering how like other mediums of art, such as photography, have impacted your life.
All art informs all artists. So the fact that you're at a concert and you hear some music and you go, oh, that's powerful, how can I use that on stage? Or you hear Spearhead singing Poor Lonesome Stranger, and you go, oh, the way that they rap to that, I'm just a concrete buffalo soldier, I got a chip like a boulder on my shoulder, and just going, oh, that, I can use that in Joe Turner, that's Harold Loomis. I've got a chip like a boulder on my shoulder. I wish somebody would say something to me right now while I'm looking for my wife. And one of the other characters describes him as a mean-looking N-word. And yeah, that you can take those things and bring them in. One of the best teachers on this campus is a playwriting instructor named Brian Thorstensen. And one of the things that he'll do for his playwrights is lay out pictures, photographs, and have them write what that story is and let the one art inform the other. Yeah, it's a good question. Here's my question for you. How do you define joy? How do you define joy? Everybody put a hand in there. Everybody put a hand in there. Everybody, yes, even the dean has to put a hand in there. The dean gonna put his hand in there. You need to put your hand in there. Good. And put your hand down when you have a definition for joy. When you have a way to define joy, put your hand down. But know when your hand goes down, that means I can call on you. So when you have a definition for joy, you can put your hand down. The hand can go down. You got the head down, the hand down. Just like, please, bro, don't call on me. I see you. I see you. Good. I'll ask you right there. What do you think? Joy. Yes. No, I'm looking right at you. Yes. Yes. Well, not high enough, so now you got to define joy. You're doing that half thing, I'm going to have, but it's not. Yeah, go. How do you define joy?
Oh, jeez. Let me see.
Microphone to the lips.
I would say like something that doesn't make you think twice in the moment of time, where you can feel present, be like immersed in like happiness and like a feeling of comfort while you're in that moment. And then for me personally, joy, I see a lot of joy like when I'm around like my friends or the people I surround myself with. So yeah, and also just like the vibes around myself, like if someone else is happy, like that like influences me in a way. So just the vibes and the energy around yourself. So yeah.
Yeah, put your hands together. That's good stuff. Well done. Well done. Happy I got in there. I got that the people that you were around. I think joy, I think that it's something that can become infectious. I didn't mean to say that just when she sneezed, but it happened. So that it affects the community and makes the community a little closer. Yeah. I think that it's the thing that makes you, you said about being present. I think that it brings you here right now. That gives me great joy. The question at dinner on the daily basis, what'd you do today that made you feel good about yourself? My daughter hates that question now, but still, that to help you try to figure out what brings you joy. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you.
I would love to hear another. I thought that was beautiful. Yeah, I would love to hear a couple more. If anybody else has a definition they could offer. Yes, Malcolm?
Say like a sense of internal belonging.
Oof, oof. Thank you. A sense of internal belonging. And what obstacles have we created that can keep people from joy? What are we doing that makes people feel like they don't belong? That's, on a systemic level, what are we doing to make somebody feel like they don't belong here? And I think that was what was happening to me when I first went to college. There was tiny, tiny, tiny school, 250 people in the first year class. Tiny. Only 250 people in the first year class. Of those 250 people, less than 20 were black. And all these messages saying, you do not belong. And I didn't feel like I even belonged in the sport, but I was afraid if I quit the sport, my dad was going, you don't belong to the school. I can send you to a cheaper school. Yeah, how we get past that to a sense of, I am worthy. I am of value. I bring something to the table that adds to it. Luis Valdez says, we got to get past the idea of the great American melting pot. Melting into what? And what do we lose when we boil it that long? And what mold are we creating? And who created that mold? And what does the mold lop off when we come out of that mold? I think we got to get past the melting pot. He said, we need to think about the great American burrito. It's got all these different items that all bring different flavor, and they combine to make something that is absolutely delicious. That's where we got to go. So what do you bring that makes that happen? Keep that in mind. Thank you for that, Malcolm. That's a terrific answer.
Any other questions? Love to hear from you. Britt, do you have a microphone? Or Amy, you have the microphone?
No, she's got one too.
Right in the second
Right here.
row.
Second row.
Oh,
I loved your kind of conversation about calling and your discovery of what calling means and what it means to you specifically. And I know you're such a brilliant storyteller, so I'm just curious, until you found that, until you prioritized kissing in 7th grade, did you, because that's so brilliant, by the way, what did you feel kind of until that point? Because you must have been 13, 14 at the time. What was kind of life for you before that moment of realization?
Thank you. I appreciate that question. Yeah, so I have an older brother and another older brother and an older sister, and I was born with a twin brother. And I was the one with asthma who was real skinny, and people would talk about the skinny one and the healthy one. And when my brother somehow hit puberty, we were fraternal, so he hit puberty before me, and he flexed one time, and my mom said, "Ooh, my baby got muscles," and I was like, "Oh man." Athletic is what they were doing to define their identity, and I was thinking maybe I can try this. I hated track, I hated running. I felt like run is what you do when you're being punished for something you did that was bad. So trying to figure out those things and thinking maybe it was going to be the military. My dad was in the Air Force. That's what helped lift him out of abject poverty. My brothers were all talking about going in the military. My oldest went into the Army. My next brother went into the Marines. My twin brother went to Marine Reserves, and then he augmented over to the Army, became an Army Ranger. Everybody, and they wouldn't take me because I have asthma. And so I was like, oh, man. So trying to figure out what that thing was up until that point was kind of listless. I thought it might be education, but when I hit, in 6th grade, I was in one school district. Teacher was the first black science teacher I had was talking to us about DNA and said, just call it DNA because you probably won't be able to handle what the entire word is. And I'm like, deoxyribonucleic acid. I got it now. Okay. And felt good about myself. Went to this other school. They were talking about DNA. And I said, I know what that is. And she said, what is it? I said, deoxyribonucleic acid. And she was like, oh, look at you. You're like an encyclopedia. And I said, a good-looking encyclopedia. That was at the beginning of my 7th grade year. August. By Halloween of that year, my Halloween costume was Captain Ugly. That's what I felt about myself. I came as Captain Ugly, a superhero who could beat you with his ugly stick. So I'm using my creativity, but what I'm really saying is I feel ugly here. I feel we've moved to this rural part of Fort Worth, outside in the outskirts and stuff, and we're this kind of oddities, mostly white, it's a school with a rodeo team and that sort of thing. And I was like, oof. But that's what I was feeling. And so to find this other thing that looked like it would give me a home, an instant community, that's one of the things that helped a lot. Does that help answer your question? Thank you so much for asking it. Tony, here comes the mic.
Thank you. Would you say that anybody with a passion for the arts can, I guess what I'm trying to say is, do you believe that people with a passion of the arts should try and contribute in the best way they can, even if it may not be exactly what they want to do, in the sense that maybe somebody really wants to be an actor, but they happen to have very good skills as a stage manager, but they may not want to, go into being a stage manager, things of that nature? Would you place the value of elevating the arts above the individual?
I think that's a really great question about where it is that I really fit as opposed to where I sort of fit. It's close to where my gifts, my desires, and what the world needs. Theater always needs stage managers. But if the thing that really brings you joy is not stage management, it's acting, then I would still say try to find that avenue for acting. It might mean that you have to create your own company to create your own opportunities to act, but you might also try to break it down more. What is it about acting that gives me such joy? Is it being in community with other people? Is it the opportunity to say those great words and those sorts of things? My first college Shakespeare instructor was a valedictorian from Harvard, and when he taught As You Like It was the first play we learned, he acted out the entire first act by himself. And I was like, oh, he liked saying Shakespeare. He liked turning other people on to Shakespeare, but he liked saying Shakespeare a lot. He wasn't brilliant, but I was engaged, and that was like, it was like in the 80s, it was like Audible. So that was great. I could hear the whole play and watch this other dude do all the work. And I still have some of those passages in my head from how he acted it, what he did. What is it about that really brings you there? And really, that's what Jesuit discernment is all about, to say that there are tough questions that we have to ask ourselves. How do we go, what process do we go through to really get to the answer that's going to help us out? Because if it can help us out, we are going to be in a much better position to help out other people. There are people out there who need you. More importantly, I'll be honest with you, there are people out there who are clocking you. Somebody from your high school saw you do X and said, all right, and then they went to Santa Clara. I didn't know Santa Clara, but because they went there, I looked it up and I found out this. And yeah, there are eyes on you, and you don't know them. You don't know them. They haven't spoken to you, but they may be watching you. And so there's some importance about the choices that you make. So one, make good choices, and two, make choices that sometimes can provide you other choices. So maybe stage manage now, maybe make some connections, and then leave this. I know an actor who I first met work in the box office at American Conservatory Theater. I was getting tickets, and they're like, oh yeah, I've seen you on stage. And I was like, cool. I was like, oh yeah, you know such and such, you know such and such. Dude played Iago with me last June. And the first time I met him, he's a fabulous actor, Johnny Marino. So the first time I met him, he was taking tickets and selling tickets at American Conservatory Theater. So many moons ago, but still, yeah. So there are many doors that can open to the place you want to go. Thanks, Tony.
Just one more question in the second row, Britt.
Right here, Christian.
Thank you. So theater has this incredible ability to bring people joy, both the people who watch it and the people who are in it, but it also has this other incredible ability to hold society, individuals, and institutions incredibly accountable. And both of these are incredible methods. When do we know which one to emphasize, which one to lean into? When do we know when we need to commiserate and heal versus when we need to play justice?
We have to listen. It's the toughest part of the work. It's the toughest part of life, I think, is listening. So you have to listen to the moment. Is this the moment where we need to have a lesson on humility? Or is this a moment where we need to balance the other lessons that we've had on humility with something that gives us more joy and a bit of humility as well? You have to really, really listen to the moment. I'm trying to, there's a small theater in Healdsburg that I'm working with and trying to pick the next season and what that's going to be and pick the right plays for the right reasons. And the right balance of plays is really tough. This is something I should have done about 3 weeks ago. And I'm still wrestling with which plays which pieces, which actors. Am I really loving that play, or is that play? It's called Sex with Strangers. I'm like, I might sell tickets. But it's probably not a really good enough reason to do that play. And I think I'm going to have to let that one probably go and think about another one that is more potent, even if it doesn't fill all the seats. So those sorts of questions are questions we have to constantly ask, and then you have to re-ask. Is it still right to do this play? Is it still right? Is it still the right time? Is something happened that makes us back away from this play at this moment? So, yeah.
I imagine that's incredibly hard because you know whichever stories you are telling, there are so many you're not telling, right? And so to think about a season and to think about the audience and what they're exposed to is
Yes.
huge. It's huge.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Oh, yes, Jeremy.
Hi, I thought your story in acting and theater was pretty fascinating, but I was pretty curious about what kind of made you go into education and teaching, and how rewarding has that experience been for you?
One of the reasons I chose the school I did was because my girlfriend went to that college. I'm just chasing women. I'm just chasing, no. And so she was interested in teaching, and the idea about teaching was something that I was interested in. I was thinking I wanted to coach, but I realized my coaches spent far more time with me than they did with their families, and I didn't like that balance. And I started thinking about directing students and plays and things. I thought that would be better. So I went and was a communications major with an emphasis in theater. And then there were a lot of theater classes that had us reading a lot, but so did English, and there was a lot of great things in English. So I realized how close I was to an English major, and started doubling up and became an English major as my double major. And then stayed for it was a program where in my 5th year I could get a master's because I'd been spending summers all along taking more classes. So I got my master's in secondary education there. And it wasn't till January of my year working in my master's that I decided to audition for graduate school to say, maybe I'll act. And I decided if I could find a graduate program I wanted to go to that would give me a full ride, then I would go to graduate school. But if people wanted me but weren't going to give me a full ride, then I wouldn't. I was going to go teach. And thought it'll be a good indicator on whether I think I can get any work. And I got offers to several places, and one of them was SMU, where I used to, I would drive by when I would I'd go clubbing in Dallas, and I'd go by and look at the school at night and tell my date, that's probably where I want to go to grad school, because I thought it would impress them. And then I went there for grad school. So, yeah.
Please join me in thanking Professor Billingslea for his time.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here and staying so long.
Thank you.
And even if your grade depended on it, I appreciate the fact that you were here. So thanks.
No, they're so happy to be here. Thank you.